Hello everyone and welcome to this webcast. My name is Ben Frost. I'm the coordinator of the Planning Webcast Series Consortium. It's now 1 o'clock, so we'll begin our presentation shortly. Today we'll have a presentation on utilizing LEED for neighborhood development to strengthen your municipal sustainability efforts. And our presenters will be Casey Studhalter, Meg Byerly, John Dalzell, and Jennie Nolon Blanchard. For help during today's webcast, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box found in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen or call 1-800-263-6317. For content questions, please feel to type those into the question box and we'll be able to answer those at the end of the presentation during the question and answer session. Here's a list of the sponsoring chapters, divisions, and universities. We'd like to thank them all for making these webcasts possible, as well as the National Capital Chapter for sponsoring today's webcast. As you can see, we'll have a number of different webcasts coming up, including multimodal wayfinding on July 12th, which is not online yet, so stay tuned for that. We'll be taking next week off for the holiday weekend. To register for these upcoming webcasts, please visit www.utah-apa.org/webcasts.htm and register for your webcast of choice. You can follow us on Twitter at Planning Webcast or like us on Facebook at Planning Webcast Series to receive up-to-date information on the Planning Webcast Series sponsored by the chapters, divisions, and universities. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to www.planning.org/CM, select today's date, and then select today's webcast by its name. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits. You can also search for the event by the event code 24016. We're recording today's webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel later today or sometime next week. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube, and a PDF of the PowerPoint will be made available on request. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's webcast. Moderating today's panel is Casey Studhalter. Casey is a member of the LEED for Neighborhood Development team at the U.S. Green Building Council, working on market-facing efforts to assist projects pursuing certification and to increase LEED ND's reach. He focuses on supporting local government use of the rating system and its use in creating affordable, sustainable communities for all. Meg Byerly is a staff attorney at the Land Use Law Center at Pace Law School in White Plains, New York. There she works on center projects related to renewable energy, distressed properties, sea level rise adaptation, and sustainable neighborhood development. She is the principal author for several center publications, including the Technical Guidance Manual for Sustainable Neighborhoods. John Dalzell leads green building and sustainable development initiatives at the BRA, Boston's Planning and Economic Development Agency, including public and internal policy initiatives. Mr. Dalzell is a member of the U.S. Green Building Council Board of Directors, where he provides perspectives on urban design, city and community development to the National Board. He served USGBC's LEED for Neighborhood Development Core Committee, which drafted the ND rating system, is acting chair of the USGBC Location and Planning Technical Advisory Group, and is a founding board member of the USGBC Massachusetts chapter. And rounding out the panel is Jennie Nolon Blanchard, who is a staff attorney and manager of urban programs for the Land Use Law Center at Pace Law School in White Plains, New York, where she's also an adjunct professor. Ms. Blanchard's work focuses primarily on the growth of urban centers, working closely with cities to address obstacles to redevelopment and sustainability. She has achieved designation by the U.S. Green Building Council as a Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design LEED accredited professional and currently serves as the chair-elect for the APA's Planning and Law Division. Casey, I'm turning the presentation over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. Good afternoon. Thank you for those great introductions, and thank you most importantly for hosting us this afternoon, and to all of you out there for joining us. We're really excited to be here today to share two recently released free resources that USGBC has created in partnership with the Pace University School of Law, really intended to help local governments leverage the LEED for Neighborhood Development rating system and to support local sustainability goals. The agenda here this afternoon, just so everyone knows what to expect, we do have 90 minutes. We'll allow plenty of time for questions at the end. First off, I will provide a very brief introduction to the LEED for Neighborhood Development rating system. Then I can touch on the first of three resources that we've created for local governments, the first of which being the Local Government Guide. Then I'll hand things over to my colleague Meg, who can go into depth on the Technical Guidance Manual. Then we'll be able to hear a case study from John Dalzell's work in Boston. And then we'll close out the presentation with Jennie Nolon providing a description of the final resource, the Floating Zone tool. Ben gave some great introductions of the panel. I'll suffice to say that I'm very lucky to be joined by a great collection of experts on the topic. I will say all of our contact information is provided at the end, so please do feel free to follow up with any questions directly after the fact. Many of you are likely familiar to some extent with the organization, the U.S. Green Building Council, the variety of LEED rating systems in the market, and even perhaps LEED-ND in particular. But because our focus is on LEED-ND specifically and its nuanced applications for local government use, I will provide a very brief overview of the rating system just to really set the stage for the resources themselves. I'm happy to answer any technical questions, but this, I don't want to get lost too much in the details of the rating system itself. The context, generally speaking, for the establishment of the rating system is really comes from the status quo development patterns both in the U.S. and increasingly around the world. Generally, it's believed that sprawl is hard to quantify, but often we know it when we see it, as many of you know, characterized by low-density, single-use landscapes, separated uses, and increased vehicle miles traveled. The source of CO2 emissions coming from our development patterns really emphasizes the importance of addressing land use as a component of sustainability planning at the local government level. Approximately 38% of carbon emissions are attributed to buildings, with another 30% coming from the transportation sector. Personal automobiles are certainly a major contributor to those transportation-related emissions, and that's why development patterns that promote alternative transportation modes are really so successful at reducing carbon emissions. This chart here from a study of urban Toronto shows the opportunity present to drastically lower CO2 emissions just by rethinking how we design our communities. The typical suburban development represented on the chart produces over twice the carbon emissions of a more compact development with a range of land uses. According to Professor Chris Nelson, professor at the University of Utah, 2/3 of the structures in the U.S. that will exist in 2050 will be built between now and then. I think that really emphasizes the opportunity we have to change how those structures are built and laid out and their subsequent impacts. The LEED for Neighborhood Development rating system is born as a result of a partnership between the Congress for the New Urbanism, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the U.S. Green Building Council. It was first conceived in 2002, and the rating system really integrates the principles of smart growth, new urbanism, and green building into what's the first national standard for green neighborhood development. Each of these three principles is really an integral part of the LEED-ND rating system and shown in the various credit categories, which I will touch on briefly. Each has a unique perspective, and yet they also really reinforce each other, creating a very cohesive end product. Again, the end result is a voluntary leadership standard for neighborhood development, provides a set criteria designed to help developers and designers envision sustainable communities in terms of where they're located, how they're designed, and how they perform. All around us, we see automobile-dependent streetscapes like this example here from Arlington, Virginia. Such development patterns really don't create a safe pedestrian environment. They really require the use of a car to fulfill even simple daily needs. But the vision with LEED ND is that we can transform a streetscape such as the one you see here and are really ubiquitous throughout our communities into something else. And this second slide here came about through a visioning exercise in the Columbia Pike corridor, again here in Arlington. But it shows an economically strong, vibrant streetscape complete with a variety of modes of transportation and really a place where many of us would enjoy working, living, or visiting. And communities like this kind of transformation is really what LEED ND is all about encouraging and helping to create. So again, the three concepts are really compiled into a comprehensive rating system comprised of three major credit categories, each representing its respective purpose. Like the other rating systems in the LEED family, LEED ND is voluntary and is intended to provide recognition for developments that achieve varying levels of certification. It's comprised of a series of prerequisites and credits, again broken into three credit categories and representing the three main focus areas. But you know, the one thing I want to point out is our focus here today isn't really on the traditional use of the rating system as a certification tool. But like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions if that's helpful. But our view is that LEED ND is somewhat unique in that it has the potential to serve as an advocacy and planning tool as well. So our focus here this afternoon will be on alternative ways to use the rating system, really as a framework to support municipal sustainability efforts at the local government level. So with that in mind, I would like to sort of briefly mention the three focus areas to illustrate the items addressed for those that aren't intimately familiar with the rating system. The first credit category is smart location and linkages, and it really boils down to where the project is built, focused on selecting the best site and then building on the best portion of that site. It really prizes infill locations and the protection of natural resources. In the SLL, or smart location and linkage prerequisites, preference is given to locations close to existing community centers, sites with good transit access, infill sites, previously developed sites, and those sites that are adjacent to existing development. Once the location has been selected, the other prerequisites call for development to be built on the right portions of that site so that natural resources such as prime farmland, wildlife habitat, and wetlands can be protected. Exemptions are given for previously developed land. The second credit category is the neighborhood pattern and design, and that's really focused on what is built. And again, the end goal here is leading to a compact, complete, and connected neighborhood. Real focus on creating something that's pedestrian-friendly, increasing walkability, providing a mix of uses, and ultimately establishing diverse communities. The neighborhood pattern and design credit category emphasizes compact, walkable, vibrant neighborhoods with good connections to nearby communities. These neighborhoods provide many important benefits. These include efficient use of land and infrastructure, opportunities to reduce driving and greenhouse gas emissions, conservation of resources, convenient access to amenities, including public transit, and more opportunities to walk and bicycle. The third major credit category in LEED for neighborhood development is the green infrastructure and building category. And this really focuses on the how it's built. Incorporates many of the traditional credits that you would come to expect from a LEED rating system, focusing on energy and water use reductions. But given that LEED ND has that neighborhood scale, it's also expanded to look at both the building and the district scale. So that incorporates a focus on stormwater management and historic reuse. The overall goal of both the prerequisites and the credits in this category Focus on measures that can reduce the environmental consequences of the construction and operation of buildings and infrastructure. In its traditional use as a rating system, using it as a certification tool for projects containing new construction and major renovations, LEED-ND was designed to be flexible and address a number of different contexts and development types. We've seen LEED-ND projects vary widely in their scope and character. Some small infill projects qualify, as do large master planned communities. Brownfield redevelopment can score very well, as can a project adjacent to existing development. Generally speaking, projects do not need to be served by transit, but certainly proximity to frequent transit is rewarded in the rating system. When looking at LEED-ND as a sustainability tool, it's important for local governments to consider the rating system is intended for individual development projects. It wasn't designed to replace or rate a comprehensive plan or a zoning code. Similarly, LEED-ND is not intended to certify an entire town, county, or city. While applicable for redevelopment, LEED-ND was not designed to rate existing neighborhoods with no new development either. USGBC has seen an interest and a need to be able to review small area or sector plans using the rating system framework. We've been internally exploring some sort of review or assessment process that USGBC could potentially offer for these smaller focused plans. And the opportunity to encourage an integrated planning process that addresses all elements of the neighborhood scale sustainability efforts and sets up future development to incorporate the principles is a really impactful place to engage. So there's certainly an interest brewing and many discussions happening. So stay tuned for those details and sort of opportunities as they arise. The certification process is really more applicable to a project that's considering pursuing certification. Generally speaking, you can see that the rating system aligns with typical project phasing, ranging all the way from site selection through occupancy, with various stages accounting for the various levels of development. There are several ways that LEED-ND can be used as a framework for new sustainable development. For example, LEED-ND encourages the efficient use of infrastructure and high-performance buildings, which can result in reduced life cycle costs. LEED-ND can also be used as a tool to meet greenhouse gas reduction targets and as a best practice manual for new development. USGBC has produced a number of resources to help local governments utilize the rating system and really leverage its framework while not necessarily using it as a traditional certification tool. The first of these resources is the Local Government Guide to LEED-ND. It's a free resource available for download on our website at usgbc.org. I'll put the web address on the screen here in a moment. The Local Government Guide provides a great primer for how to utilize LEED-ND to support those local sustainability efforts. It's a great place to start for those unfamiliar with the rating system or those just sort of exploring its potential applications, whereas the technical guidance manual and the floating zone, which we'll be discussing in much greater detail here in a minute, are more specific and provide some even greater detailed resources. Looking at the framework or the structure of the Local Government Guide here, just to start with, I'll touch on a few highlights before I turn things over to my colleagues. This document is broken down into 4 different approaches, different ways to consider using LEED-ND again to sort of leverage your local sustainability planning efforts. There are a number of case studies provided in the document. Again, it's available for a free download, so I would encourage you to check that out. The first of those categories is lead by example. We really see that jurisdictions can lead by example either through direct project involvement or by setting goals and making commitments that really set the tone and expectations for future growth in the area. A variety of strategies, as you can see there on the screen, fall into this lead by example category, and the document goes into greater detail in each of those. The second category, or the second approach in the local government guide, looks at actions a local government might take, really removing the barriers to future development. One of the most meaningful ways to support use of LEED for neighborhood development from a local government perspective is to ensure that a jurisdiction's zoning codes, regulations, and policies are supportive of the program and its principles. Rather than immediately adding a new area of regulation, a jurisdiction can take a fresh look at existing regulations to identify any possible structural barriers. The third strategy available to local governments is to provide incentives. Many local governments have found structural and financial incentives to be an effective strategy to encourage green buildings and development. Structural or development incentives include density bonuses and expedited review or permitting, which are implemented at low or no cost to government authorities and encourage developers to adopt green practices. Financial incentives, which are not always feasible during tough economic times, could include tax credits and abatements, fee reductions, or waivers and grants. The final strategy local governments can use is to provide technical assistance and education. Sustainable development requires an integrated, collaborative, and interdisciplinary approach, plus access to support, expertise, and high-quality data. There are a number of low or no-cost ways that we've identified for jurisdictions to encourage developers to undertake LEED ND by providing direct technical assistance and education. And again, many of those are elaborated in the guide as well as supporting case studies. All of the resources that we're discussing today are all available for free download from the USGBC website. The best address for the neighborhood development landing page is usgbc.org/ND. From there, you're able to navigate to information on the rating system and download any of the resources we've discussed here today. With that, I will turn things over to my colleague, Meg Byerly, to discuss the technical guidance manual.
Okay, thank you, Casey. After a 2-year process, the U.S. Green Building Council and Land Use Law Center released the Technical Guidance Manual for Sustainable Neighborhoods, along with its companion Neighborhood Development Floating Zone, in December 2012. We could not have produced and released these 2 important resources without generous financial support from the Fund for the Environment and Urban Life of the Orem Foundation, as well as the Natural Resources Defense Council, and we thank both organizations heartily for their contributions. The LEED ND rating system is recognized as a national standard for green neighborhood design, and as such provides a powerful tool that local governments can use to support and encourage sustainable development within their communities. The Technical Guidance Manual for Sustainable Neighborhoods builds on the local government guide that Casey just described by drilling deep into the LEED ND rating system to demonstrate ways municipalities can integrate criteria from LEED ND's prerequisites and credits directly into local initiatives, facilitating this process by presenting the information in a format that mirrors most local plans and codes. The manual sections parallel a typical municipality's land development plans, codes, and policies. It essentially reorganizes criteria from the rating system's 3 categories into the typical sections found in local plans and land development regulations. The manual begins by presenting strategies for integrating LEED ND criteria into local comprehensive plans and special area plans, followed by strategies for incorporating LEED ND criteria into traditional zoning code sections and site plan and subdivision regulations, as well as other land use development standards, such as building codes. It also introduces strategies for including the criteria in non-regulatory initiatives, as well as ways to streamline the project review and approval process and provide incentives and assistance for sustainable neighborhood development. Each section of the manual references the prerequisites and credits of the 2009 LEED ND rating system and presents local best practice examples and detailed case studies to illustrate its recommended strategies. Planners can use this manual in several ways. First, a municipality can use it as an evaluation tool to audit existing plans, codes, and policies systematically against the LEED ND criteria in the manual strategies. This evaluation process reveals barriers to the strategies and helps planners determine how well local initiatives promote sustainable development. Later we'll hear, moving on. A municipality also can use the manual to create a comprehensive approach to sustainable neighborhood development by completely overhauling its land development plans, regulations, and policies. For example, Cheyenne, Wyoming used the LEED ND rating system to translate broad sustainability language from its comprehensive plan into its new Unified Development Code, which was a comprehensive revision of the city's subdivision regulations, zoning ordinance, and design guidelines. The UDC incorporates LEED ND strategies into standards for mixed-use residential, commercial activity centers, and employment districts, and adds specifications for lot frontage, setbacks, building heights, and lot coverage that promote walkable urban environments. Alternatively, planners can identify specific neighborhoods within a community that are appropriate for sustainable development and apply the manual strategy solely to those target areas through a special area plan, a new zoning district, or some other mechanism such as an overlay or floating zone. Soon we'll hear from John Dalzell of the Boston Redevelopment Authority about Boston's Columbia Point Master Plan, a special area plan for the Columbia Point neighborhood that includes master plan requirements that align with LEED ND criteria. I'll now describe each section of the manual in more detail and highlight some of its strategies and best practice examples from across the nation to illustrate how planners can use the manual in their own communities. I'll begin by describing the planning section of the manual. This section is organized by a typical local comprehensive plan, which generally includes elements for land use, public facilities, transportation and circulation, housing, civic services, natural and historic resources, and economic development, among others. The manual shows municipalities how to provide a planning foundation for regulatory initiatives that support sustainable development by using LEED ND criteria to incorporate corresponding planning principles into appropriate comprehensive plan elements or other plans such as special area plans, which are also known as small area plans, master plans, or specific plans. The manual does this by showing how planners can convert LEED ND intent language and criteria into analogous planning goals and actions. By intent language and criteria, I'm referring to the general statement of intent and specific performance thresholds or prescriptive measures embodied in each LEED ND prerequisite and credit. The manual lists a comprehensive plan strategy for each of the typical planning elements. Each comprehensive plan strategy lists related LEED ND prerequisites and credits, presents planning goals developed using intent language from those LEED ND prerequisites and credits, and describes planning actions or implementation measures that derive from the specific LEED ND criteria. The manual includes comprehensive plan strategies to encourage sustainable land uses, to apply green development principles to new and existing public facilities, to provide sustainable transportation and circulation infrastructure, to create sustainable housing, to provide improved access to civic waste disposal and recreational services, to protect natural and historic resources, and to support green economic development initiatives. Although the planning section of the manual uses typical comprehensive plan elements to organize LEED ND planning goals and actions into strategies, a local government can choose to arrange these goals and actions in many different ways within its comprehensive plan or special area plans based on its unique planning objectives. To illustrate, I'll describe parts of the manual's comprehensive plan strategy for a typical land use element. The land use planning strategy includes planning goals and actions to ensure appropriate locations for redevelopment and new development, to promote diverse land uses, to encourage compact development, to promote building at a pedestrian-friendly scale, to construct building frontage that encourages walking, to maximize solar access, to encourage on-site renewable energy sources, and to support district heating and cooling systems. The land use element strategy begins by recommending planning goals and actions to ensure future development is sited in sustainable locations. These goals and planning actions derive from SLL Prerequisite 1, Smart Location, and SLL Credit 1, Preferred Locations. Recommended planning goals include encouraging redevelopment of existing communities with infrastructure, reducing vehicle trips, increasing walking and bicycling, reducing adverse environmental and public health effects, and conserving natural and financial resources. Recommended planning actions to achieve these goals involve locating future development within sites served by existing water and wastewater infrastructure or within a legally adopted, publicly owned planned water and wastewater service area, as well as locating future development on infill sites, on previously developed sites, on sites adjacent to existing street connectivity, meaning a minimum number of publicly accessible street intersections per square mile, and locating development on sites near transit with high transit service, as well as on sites near many existing neighborhood uses. Other related planning actions include prioritizing public infrastructure repairs, improvements, and enhancements in existing neighborhoods with additional development capacity, and incentivizing private infill development. Along with planning language that shows where future development should occur, the land use element strategy also recommends including planning goals and actions that steer future development away from the sensitive parts of a community's environment, using planning language derived from SLL prerequisites 2 through 5 that prioritize natural resource conservation. Here, the recommended planning goal is to protect important natural resources from development. Related planning actions involve protecting habitat for imperiled species and ecological communities, protecting wetlands and water bodies, and protecting important agricultural soils, as well as floodplains. The land use element strategy also recommends planning goals and actions to encourage diverse land uses. For example, the strategy includes a recommended goal to group land uses in accessible neighborhoods and regional centers to reduce vehicle miles traveled and encourage walking, biking, and transit use. The related planning action involves allowing a variety of uses such as food retail, community serving retail services, and civic or community facilities within a walking distance of nearby residences. This planning goal and action derives from NPD Credit 3 mixed-use neighborhood centers. The final planning recommendation I'll describe from the land use element strategy involves planning goals and actions to promote sustainable design standards for buildings. This planning language derives from NPD Prerequisite 1 and Credit 1 walkable streets. The recommended planning goal is to promote walking by providing a safe and appealing street environment for pedestrians. Related actions to achieve this goal include placing principal functional building entries on front facades that face a public space, such as a street, park, or plaza, as well as placing building entries at frequent intervals along streets and sidewalks. Other planning actions include creating ground floor retail in non-residential and mixed-use projects and installing clear glass facades for ground-level retail, service, or trade uses. Further, these planning actions prioritize limiting blank walls along building facades, keeping ground-level retail, service, and trade windows visible and unshuttered at night, and building elevated finished floors for ground floor residential units. I'll now turn it over to John Dalzell to present a case study of Boston's Columbia Point Master Plan, which provides a great example of how a local government can use LEED to help create planning language.
John, are you there? We're having trouble hearing you.
Forgive me all. How is that now?
That's great.
Much better. Thanks.
It's amazing when you turn off the mute button. Thank you all. Let me jump right into this. Columbia Point came before us, driven in part by a number of property owners having proposed significant ideas for redevelopment in the area. In fact, there's probably the potential for 4 different LEED ND projects in the Columbia Point Master Plan area. Today it's a mix of uses in the broad area, anchored by an MBTA red line train station that provides quick access to downtown Boston. It's also a beautiful site jetting out into Boston Harbor with the JFK Memorial Library as a sort of beacon at the tip of Columbia Point. Most of the projects are situated along the main arterial, which you can see sort of running top to bottom in the slide. The plan proposes to actually change uses that are out there now, including a convention center, kind of suburban low-density office building, Boston Globe's printing operations, and actually a few large vacant sites. The city, recognizing that all of these projects needed to be coordinated, set about working with the community to create a master plan. And with a keen eye on sustainability, what we decided to do was use the LEED for neighborhood development rating system throughout the master planning process. For this work, we put out an RFP and hired a local planning firm with some various partners. And in that work, we actually required that they utilize the rating system throughout the process, and make it visible to the community and all the stakeholders participating. I'm trying to advance the slide. There we go. Relative to LEED ND, this was a very unconventional use. We had some experience with this running LEED ND in the background of other planning processes in the city. So as we were moving through those, we'd take our master plan recommendations and screen them against the LEED ND rating system, seeing what kinds of things scored well, what didn't score well, even things that were missed. For this, we also wanted to make sure that the master plan recommendations aligned with LEED ND criteria, because we would, through our Boston zoning code, require projects of this scale to meet specific LEED ND outcomes. We also wanted to use this to promote sustainability in the area, and thought that this might actually be a very different approach to the sustainability conversation with the community. So we set out with some fairly straightforward tasks. We would be evaluating the master plan and its recommendations against LEED ND prerequisites and criteria. We did want to see what the aggregate score would be, and we were going to use that to set a requirement for future projects. So when these development projects came in, we wanted to comfortably be able to say, we expect you to achieve this kind of LEED ND outcome. We certainly saw opportunity in this for improving the master plan, so finding gaps or strengthening particular recommendations, especially where LEED ND provides a great deal of best practice and detail on what kinds of outcomes we were seeking. And then we wanted to include specific LEED ND criteria in the master plan. To that point, this is a page from the master plan, and what you see, and I hope the graphic is as clear to you as it is to me, those are green leaves that have accompanied specific master plan recommendations. Where they are green leaf, they're actually drawing directly from the LEED ND rating system. And we actually found ourselves doing that quite frequently throughout the master plan recommendation, and thought that was really a pretty interesting outcome. And these are just more indications of the same thing. The work actually made very clear to us that we could very reasonably require a LEED ND silver outcome of all projects going forward, but that we wanted to have each development set its goal as at the gold level. We felt very comfortable that they could achieve that too, but use this kind of more conservative approach to set an absolute floor of LEED ND silver. There were a few interesting takeaways from this process that I don't think we really expected. one of which is for those who are out there regularly doing community planning and dealing with experienced community organizations. A lot of folks have come to see sustainability as meaning denser development and taller buildings. And we face that kind of a challenge here in Boston on a regular basis. What we hadn't expected was how much of a good housekeeping seal of approval LEED ND functioned as. And so while I would say people had varying degrees of understanding around sustainability without even debating the merits of different outcomes such as density, they really saw following this national third-party guideline as a very legitimate evaluation of sustainability, and frankly, it was a real game changer for us. In fact, because we were recommending fairly significant development in the master plan area, especially around the station area where there's both infrastructure and economic forces to make for really good, taller development projects. I think the other takeaway really was on the staff side of this, on the city side of this, seeing how LEED ND guided us and aided us in identifying gaps in our master plan, in strengthening some of the very things we had always included. My favorite example was we always talk about active streets, just saying that we want, streets that will be very accommodating of pedestrians and never bothering with adding the kinds of details that LEED ND provides for as the specifics. I think in this way, too, we found comfort with our development partners because they were also seeing a national third-party standard. And as importantly, they were getting the ground rules for engagement going forward at the beginning. So we were very clear and fairly specific as to what we wanted to see around our redevelopment goals for the area, around our sustainability goals, and that we were utilizing a system that they could also utilize. In fact, they would have to utilize, but they could also utilize in a way of developing their vision, their brand, and using the LEED ND process to add value to the development planning and ultimately to the development project. So with that, I will pass this back to Meg.
Thanks, John. I have a little bit of background noise here that I'm hoping won't interfere too much with what's going on. Okay, so I'll begin. So now I'm briefly going to present the manual's regulatory sections, beginning with the section on traditional zoning code elements. This section is organized by the zoning elements traditionally included in zoning codes throughout the country. These include use density and bulk and area requirements, as well as parking and loading requirements. Use density and bulk and area requirements in traditional zoning district regulations often can conflict with the techniques embodied in LEED ND. The manual recommends that municipalities, where appropriate, relax development standards to allow mixed uses, greater development densities, smaller minimum lot sizes, taller buildings, and reduced setbacks. The manual also recommends strategies for reducing off-street parking and relocating loading docks. To provide an example, I'll briefly summarize the parking and loading strategies in the manual and then present a best practice example of a community that has applied these strategies. Fixed parking ratios and loading standards often result in large off-street parking lots and structures that encourage automobile dependence, as well as loading and service docks that interfere with the pedestrian realm. The manual's parking and loading strategies provide techniques for minimizing these impacts. The first parking strategy advocates eliminating off-street parking minimums altogether where possible to provide only that parking that is absolutely necessary. If parking minimums or maximums are necessary, planners should apply criteria from NPD Credit 5, reduce parking footprint, and prohibit off-street service parking lots that collectively cover more than 20% of the total development footprint and that are individually larger than 2 acres. Also, parking requirements should require off-street parking to be located behind principal buildings and away from street frontage if possible. Planners can use shared parking to facilitate the reduced off-street parking requirements in the first strategy by allowing a reduction in the minimum parking requirement in exchange for an adequate number of parking spaces shared between adjacent uses that have peak parking needs at different times of the day. Further, parking requirements can explicitly permit or require shared use vehicle parking in tandem with a reduced parking requirement. As in NPD Credit 5, these shared parking provisions should require a minimum amount of parking spaces dedicated for carpools or shared use vehicles that are placed within 200 feet of building entrances and marked with signs. Transportation Demand Management, or TDM programs, increase transportation efficiency through strategies that reduce automobile use and parking demand within a designated area. Using criteria from NPD Credit 8, Transportation Demand Management, municipalities can allow reduced off-street parking requirements when a developer creates a TDM program that reduces a project's weekday peak period motor vehicle trips by at least 20% compared with a baseline case. TDM programs can achieve this reduction through parking cash-out programs, flex time or flexible work hours that avoid peak commute times, ride-sharing and a ride-matching systems, pedestrian and bicycle promotion policies, subsidized rides home for alternate transportation commuters, and car-free programs. NPD Credit 5 encourages below-grade and structured parking, which removes parking from the public eye, allows the use of limited available land for pedestrian-oriented uses, and decreases the visual dominance of the automobile. A municipality can incentivize, or when reasonable and physically possible, require structured parking in appropriate zoning districts by requiring off-street parking below grade, integrated within buildings or structured ramps, behind active uses, and screened from view of the public streets, such as by lining the first floor with retail uses. As in NPD Prerequisite 1 and Credit 1 walkable streets, municipalities can limit disruption to the pedestrian realm caused by loading docks and driveway access points by prohibiting docks, service bays, and driveway access points between primary structure and major streets where other location options exist. Finally, zoning can require a minimum amount of secure, enclosed bicycle storage spaces and bicycle rack parking spaces for multi-unit residential buildings, retail spaces, and other non-residential buildings, as in SLL Credit 4, bicycle network and storage. Planners should require bike racks that are visible from any main entry located within 100 feet of main entries, served with night lighting, and protected from damage by nearby vehicles, and should mandate that retail and non-residential buildings provide a minimum number of shower and changing facilities based on the amount of workers using the building. Champaign, Illinois' urban neighborhood zoning districts provide a great example of some of these strategies. These districts were developed using the LEED pilot rating system. Design requirements for these districts limit commercial off-street parking lots to 85% of minimum parking requirements in the city's code, and prevent developments from locating commercial and multifamily residential off-street parking lots between the front of the building and the street. Also, these districts require developments to share parking areas with other uses and include bicycle facility standards. For office buildings of larger than 50,000 gross square feet and non-residential commercial uses larger than 75,000 gross square feet, developers must provide showers and locker room facilities for use by employees. They must provide 1 locker per required covered bicycle parking space and 1 shower room for every 5 covered parking spaces. Now I'll move from talking about zoning to strategies for incorporating LEED into site plan and subdivision regulations. This section of the manual focuses on incorporating site design standards related to sustainability issues into site plan and subdivision regulations, and presents on-site requirements derived from LEED criteria that municipalities can add to these regulations to facilitate sustainable development district-wide. It begins by presenting strategies for street design and transportation. These include sustainable pavement, energy-efficient traffic and streetlights, improved street connectivity, increased transit access, bicycle networks and on-street bicycle parking, street trees, narrower street widths that enhance streetscape, wide walkable sidewalks, on-street parking, and lower traffic speeds and traffic calming measures. Next, it offers stormwater management and utility strategies for implementing sustainable stormwater management infrastructure and establishing green utilities that are constructed with recycled and reclaimed materials that are energy efficient and that provide water treated and conveyed for non-potable uses. Sustainable site feature strategies include water-efficient landscaping, site lighting that reduces light pollution, protection of undisturbed impervious coverage, and solar-oriented blocks that maximize solar access. The manual continues with construction standard strategies to prevent soil erosion and sedimentation, to preserve and protect trees, and to limit construction impact zones. It also includes strategies to preserve natural resources, the regulatory counterpoint to the natural resource preservation planning goals and actions I mentioned before, as well as strategies for placing conditions on site plan and subdivision approvals, such as purchasing conservation easements to preserve natural resources and establishing covenants, conditions, and restrictions that ensure certain sustainable neighborhood characteristics in perpetuity. Finally, the section closes with strategies for increasing on-site public open space and imposing sustainable infrastructure exactions where appropriate. To provide a more detailed example from this manual section, I'll briefly describe the sustainable stormwater management strategy, followed by a best practice example. Municipalities can include in their site plan and subdivision regulations a requirement that promotes on-site stormwater management systems, which use vegetation and soil to minimize impervious surfaces, retain stormwater, and treat runoff. Planners should use criteria from GIB Credit 8, Stormwater Management, when drafting this amendment. The regulations should require that each development project create a stormwater management plan for approval. These plans should require development projects to retain on-site the total volume of rainfall that occurs during an 80th to 95th percentile rainfall event through infiltration, evapotranspiration, or reuse using on-site solution best management practices, or BMPs, selected from Volume 5 of the Washington State Department of Ecology's Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington. These BMPs may include a minimized building footprint and impervious coverage, preservation of natural areas, porous pavement or pavers, bioretention systems, rainwater cisterns, and vegetated filter strips, among others. Milwaukee, Wisconsin provides an example of a local government that facilitated a LEED ND project through its stormwater management regulations. These regulations help the brewery project, a LEED ND pilot project, achieve the maximum of 5 possible points under the pilot rating system. The regulations require stormwater measures for new developments that include mandatory reductions in runoff release rates and runoff discharge quality control criteria. They also require developers to prepare a stormwater management plan with mandatory BMPs listed within the regulations. The last regulatory section of the manual presents ways municipalities can use supplemental development standards to enhance sustainability in neighborhoods. These regulations can appear in one or more articles of the zoning code or be adopted as standalone ordinances. This section also presents strategies for building and related codes. The section begins by presenting strategies for creating design standards for building entrance placement, ground floor retail, transparent windows, elevated finished floors, and garage locations that enhance walkability. These design standard strategies present specific criteria for implementing the related planning goals and actions I discussed earlier. Next, the section presents strategies for protecting historic districts and landmarks, followed by affordable housing strategies. It then discusses regulations that control the management of construction waste, and ends by presenting code elements that foster sustainability in buildings, energy systems, plumbing, and fire safety. These building, energy, plumbing, and fire code strategies include standards for universally accessible and usable buildings, green buildings generally, green roofs and high reflectance roofs, rainwater collection devices, gray water systems, water-efficient plumbing fixtures, energy-efficient buildings, and narrow street widths in fire code standards. To provide an example from this manual section, I'll discuss the affordable housing strategy in more detail and provide a best practice example. Housing and transportation costs consume a large portion of low and moderate income housing earnings. To help create equitable neighborhoods, municipalities can mandate the inclusion of rental and for-sale dwelling units as affordable housing using criteria from NPD Credit 4 Mixed Income Diverse Communities and SLL Credit 1 Preferred Locations, which both encourage housing for households of differing incomes. NPD Credit 4 awards varying amounts of points to projects that provide between 5 and 25% of rental dwelling units priced up to between 60 and 80% of the area median income, or AMI, and awards points to projects that provide between 5 and 15% of for-sale dwelling units priced up to between 100 and 120% of AMI. These LEED parameters represent a national threshold that municipalities can reference and use to tailor to regional or local equivalencies. If an inclusionary zoning mandate is not feasible, a local government instead could adopt incentives to encourage affordable housing where allowed by state law. This could include awarding additional density to developers who provide affordable housing units, as well as waiving certain area, height, parking, or other requirements. Other possible incentives include abating local taxes, providing mortgage financing, acquiring and disposing of property, and providing infrastructure for housing built by nonprofit and other developers under public-private partnerships. Nashville, Tennessee's Downtown Code provides a great example of a zoning incentive awarded in exchange for affordable housing. Nashville developed the Downtown Code to foster sustainable neighborhoods after awarding variances for LEED and similar projects. The Downtown Code's bonus height program allows additional building height in downtown Nashville in exchange for workforce housing. Qualifying developments must reserve workforce housing for ownership or rental by households with incomes below a specified percentage of AMI in Davidson County as determined by the city's Metropolitan Development Housing Agency. Prior to final site plan review, the developer must execute an agreement, restrictive covenant, or other binding restriction on land use that preserves affordability for a required period. I'll now present a case study from Mount Vernon, New York that provides a great example of how a local government can use LEED to evaluate a draft zoning ordinance. With the Center's help, Mount Vernon, New York is using the manual to audit a draft zoning district for an area targeted for sustainable neighborhood development. Mount Vernon's draft mixed-use district would cover an area in the city along the Mount Vernon Avenue corridor and Southwest Street. This area is comprised of medium-density commercial development that is within a half-mile of the Mount Vernon West Station on the Metro North rail line. Currently, this area is zoned industrial, commercial business, neighborhood business, and apartment house, but mixed uses are not allowed across the zones, and the area is surrounded by residences. To describe the evaluation, I'll briefly present a few provisions of the draft ordinance and then explain recommended changes based on the evaluation using the manual's relevant strategies. The evaluation began by considering the permitted, accessory, and special uses listed in the draft mixed-use zone. As you can see, the draft included many residential and commercial uses already. We compared these draft use requirements to Manual Strategy 2.1 mixed uses. This strategy references criteria from NPD Credit 3 mixed-use neighborhood centers, which requires a minimum number of uses within a quarter-mile walk distance of residential development and encourages a large variety of housing in proximity to employment opportunities, on-site renewable resources, and local food production. The use requirements in the proposed mixed-use zone coincide with these recommendations to a large degree, but to further the zone's purpose of encouraging mixed uses in proximity to residences, the city also should consider specifically allowing food retail such as supermarkets, community serving retail such as clothing stores and pharmacies, services such as hair care, civic and community facilities such as senior care and government offices that serve the public on site, live workspaces, produce gardens and greenhouses, and on-site solar and wind energy generation systems. Next, we evaluated the building height requirements in the draft mixed-use zone for two different subdistricts within the zone. The maximum building height for the MX42 subdistrict is 42 feet, and the max building height for the MX90 subdistrict is 90 feet. Manual Strategy 2.10 taller building heights was used to evaluate the draft building height requirements. This strategy references criteria from NPD Prerequisite 1 and Credit 1 walkable streets. To facilitate a sense of enclosure and pedestrian scale that encourages walking, MPD Prerequisite 1 requires a minimum building height to street width ratio of 1:3 for at least 15% of existing and new front street frontage within and bordering a project. This requirement results in a minimum of 1 foot of building height for every 3 feet of street width measured from facade to facade. Using the provided draft zoning map and Google Maps, we measured street widths from facade to facade for the 3 streets in the MX or in the mixed-use zone. After applying the height to street width ratio to these measurements, we determined the preferred minimum building heights for these streets: at least 21 feet for Mount Vernon Avenue, at least 38 feet for McQuiston Parkway North, and at least 11 feet for Southwest Street. All 3 of these building heights fall within the draft MX42 and MX90 maximum building heights, so we left this requirement as is. Finally, we'll take a look at the setback requirements in the draft mixed-use zone. These are all set at the property line with the exception of the rear yard, which may include a buffer requirement. Manual Strategy 2.11, Reduced Building Setbacks, was used to evaluate the draft setback requirements. This strategy references criteria from NPD Prerequisite 1 and Credit 1 walkable streets. NPD Prerequisite 1 and Credit 1 encourage reduced property setbacks to facilitate a pedestrian-friendly street wall, sidewalk proximity, and minimum property line distances. To comply with them, setbacks should not be more than 18 to 25 feet from property lines that interact with the pedestrian realm, and should ensure building facades are within a foot of any sidewalk along mixed-use and non-residential streets. The setbacks in the draft mixed-use zone accomplish this by allowing buildings at the property line. The front yard setbacks will enable building placement close to the street, which frees space in the rear for parking located behind or under a building. To illustrate the mixed-use zone evaluation process, I've highlighted just a few provisions from Mount Vernon's draft ordinance. In addition to use density and bulk and area requirements, recommendations from the evaluation include off-street parking reductions in exchange for amenities and policies that will reduce parking demand, as well as pedestrian-friendly design standards. Finally, I briefly want to review the manual's last 2 sections, which cover non-regulatory initiatives municipalities can use to achieve and encourage sustainable neighborhood development techniques that they can't or don't want to address through regulations. These initiatives include capital improvement plans as well as internal policies and municipal programs. Sometimes a local government wants to retrofit, renovate, or install infrastructure or facilities that will contribute to a neighborhood's sustainability, but can't impose these costs on developers. In these cases, it can amend its capital improvement plan to accommodate the improvements using LEED criteria associated with public infrastructure, facilities, and services. These capital improvement plan strategies include prioritizing brownfield cleanup and redevelopment, improving transit facilities, providing infrastructure improvements, and encouraging green building techniques in public buildings. In addition, local governments can establish internal policies and employ non-regulatory programs to encourage sustainable neighborhood development. For instance, localities can create a transportation demand management program, transit pass program, or vehicle sharing program. They can develop a comprehensive waste management program that offers recycling, hazardous waste, composting, and construction waste services. They can encourage produce garden growing areas, community gardens, community-supported agricultural programs, and farmers markets that sell locally grown produce. They can support infill development by prioritizing public infrastructure, repairs, improvements, and enhancements in existing neighborhoods with additional development capacity, and by adopting policies to incentivize private development on these types of parcels. They can encourage existing building reuse by requiring the reuse of building stock, structure, and envelope for municipal facilities and adopting incentives to encourage private development to do the same. And they can advocate increasing pedestrian and bicycle access to schools by working with school district planners to develop policies that favor school location near existing and planned neighborhoods. The next section of the manual describes procedures, incentives, and assistance municipalities can implement to support sustainable neighborhood development and LEED projects either in conjunction with or in lieu of the regulatory methods discussed above. These techniques include project approvals, process streamlining, and incentives and assistance programs. Often the local project review and approval process can be long and difficult to navigate and involves the public late in the process. To avoid process pitfalls for neighborhood developments, municipalities can design a clear roadmap of the review process that is easy for project applicants to follow. They can provide expedited review for sustainable development projects to help applicants save time and money. They can include community outreach and involvement in project reviews to ensure the entire community is on board, and they can implement internal project review standards to negotiate with and encourage project applicants to include sustainable development amenities during the approval process. In addition to project streamlining, municipalities can offer incentives and assistance to motivate developers to implement the manual strategies voluntarily. First, local governments can offer bonus zoning or density incentives in exchange for public amenities if authorized by state law. They can offer tax increment financing to help fund needed infrastructure and related development costs as authorized by state statute. They can award property tax abatements in exchange for sustainable amenities. Local governments can offer fee waivers, reductions, rebates, or reimbursements for projects that exhibit sustainable features such as infill development. Municipalities can offer direct financial assistance to pay for features the development projects otherwise could not afford to build, such as infrastructure or public open space. Municipal staff can offer technical assistance during the project review approval process, as well as help with complex code issues and sustainable development techniques. Local governments can provide workshops, educational programs, and communication networks to disseminate information and educate community members. And finally, municipalities can offer developers online publicity as an official program participant, free outdoor signage, press releases, competitions, awards, or seals of approval, among other marketing techniques. I'll end, here we go. I'll end by discussing, oh goodness, had a little trouble. Here we go. I'll end by discussing Berkeley, California's Green Pathway Ordinance, which is a great incentive best practice example. This ordinance provides expedited permitting for certain development projects within the city's commercial downtown mixed-use district, which includes urban design metrics from the LEED ND rating system. Under the Green Pathway Ordinance, development projects qualified for expedited review if they exceed CDMU green building requirements and provide additional public benefits. For example, qualified projects must not impact historical resources, must provide affordable housing, and must comply with street wall facade standards that enhance the pedestrian realm, among other requirements. That concludes the technical guidance manual portion of the webcast. I'll now turn it over to Jennie, Nolon, Blanchard, who will present an overview of neighborhood development floating zone.
Hi, everyone. So as we wrap up today, I'm going to give a brief overview of the second resource that the Land Use Law Center created with the USGBC, a model floating zone for green neighborhood development. Let's make sure, yep, I do have control of the keyboard now. Okay, so I'm going to review with you the 5 key advantages of a floating zone approach, the basic mechanics of floating zones, the legality of floating zones in the U.S., and finally a breakdown of the model neighborhood development floating zone that we created. Communities can use a floating zone to establish a new district in the local zoning code and to invite developers who wish to propose projects meeting sustainability goals, such as those intended for LEED certification, to apply to the local legislative body for the new district to be mapped to their parcels. So using the floating zone mechanism in this context has 5 key advantages. First, it allows the community to memorialize green development standards that meet local needs in a single zoning district by incorporating them as zoning standards, which can be affixed to appropriate parcels. Second, the burden of identifying the most environmentally and economically preferable sites for green development is borne by the LEED ND rating system, which takes environmental considerations into account, and by developers who understand the construction costs, design, and markets most appropriate for these new LEED ND-based zoning standards. So in other words, communities can really rely on an established tool and set of metrics to offload that regulatory burden associated with green zoning. Third, the ordinance creates a relatively streamlined process for the developer and community to rezone land and secure site plan approval. So using our model ordinance, communities with limited limited staff and resources can save a lot of time and expense of a more traditional review and revision of their zoning ordinance while still increasing their environmental sustainability. Likewise, developers save the time and expense involved in taking LEED ND projects through the typical hurdles that they face at the municipal level while still meeting the LEED ND standards and more efficiently obtaining the entitlements necessary for their certification. The fourth advantage is that without such a mechanism available, many developers are forced to apply for variances in order to obtain full entitlements for certification. So by avoiding the need for variances, costs to the developer are dramatically reduced, thereby further incentivizing green development, and communities avoid creating dangerous precedent for future variances. And then fifth, a floating zone approach, when applied in low and medium density areas, preserves the value of the increased density that's permitted under LEED ND for developers who are building the type of sustainable development desired by the community. This prevents the economic windfall that results from a rezoning approach, which would cause current property owners to sell their land to developers of sustainable projects at an inflated price. So in sum, our model zone is really meant for local governments that desire green development, but that are faced with limited staff, time, and resources, so they can't necessarily implement all the techniques that Meg described in the manual. The floating zone approach saves a more limited municipality time and money while still creating an incentive mechanism to further green, more socially and environmentally responsible development, and while still allowing the local government to have significant control over the approval process. So what are the mechanics, the basic mechanics of a floating zone? Floating zones, which are typically used to incentivize a particular type of development, are considered flexible zoning districts because of their departure from traditional Euclidean zoning models and the increased flexibility that they offer to developers and to communities in the application of their standards. In creating a floating zone, a zone classification is first authorized for future use, but it's not actually placed on the zoning map immediately. Instead, developers of compliant parcels are invited to make an application to have the zone applied in a particular location. So floating zones contain standards that supplant the underlying zoning. They can constitute wholesale replacement of the underlying zone, or they can leave in place provisions of the underlying zone where it's consistent with the objectives of the floating zone. A locality can apply the floating zone to a particular area either upon the petition of a developer, at the local legislature's initiative, or upon the recommendation of the planning board or commission. Upon approval, the parcel is then rezoned to reflect the new use, and it becomes a small zoning district. The zoning map is then amended to apply the floating zoning district to that parcel of land, and the parcel's development is then governed by the use, dimensional, and other provisions of the floating zone. Now, just as a brief aside, floating zoning is one of the lesser understood land techniques. People often confuse it with overlay zoning, to which it's very similar. But floating zones and overlay zones were originally developed for different purposes, and when they're used properly, each provides a unique benefit, or rather a set of unique benefits that are not available from the other one. So the full resource that we created, the full floating zone resource that we worked on for USGBC, has a broader explanation of these two techniques. So you should reference that document for further information on them and for a recommendation also on a model overlay zone developed in 2011 by Criterion planners if you decide that an overlay zone is more appropriate for your community. Now, briefly, the legality of floating zones. Flexible zoning districts such as floating zones must be authorized under state law, either under specific language in the Zoning Enabling Act or under state court interpretations holding that these flexible zoning districts are legal. Appendix A of our full resource document provides a discussion of states that specifically authorize the use of floating zones. And of course, you can speak with your municipal attorney to help determine whether you can use this technique in your state. And on to our floating zone for green neighborhood development. So communities can use these floating zones to memorialize LEED ND or other green neighborhood development standards in a single zoning district by incorporating them as eligibility conditions and district regulations that can be affixed to appropriate locations. The model ordinance that we created establishes a new zoning district, the Neighborhood Development Floating Zone, or NDFZ, as we call it, drawing on the prerequisites and credits of the LEED ND rating system as green development standards. Under this approach, developers who propose projects that they intend to certify under LEED ND or other such standards can apply to the local legislative body for this new zoning district to be mapped to their parcels, thereby removing barriers to certification within the local zoning code. Each section in our resource document is annotated for additional clarity, so you should keep that in mind. But regarding these annotations, I want to point out that there are many legal issues that communities may be concerned with using floating zones for a single parcel, such as spot zoning, federal and state preemption, antitrust law violations, the doctrine of non-delegation, all of these legal issues that you might hear discussed when you're talking about using one of the LEED rating systems in zoning. Now, our annotations in our full document deal with each of these legal issues in full detail. So for the purposes of this webinar and really your sanity, because who wants to hear all of the legal info at this point, I'm not going to discuss how our model deals with those issues, but please do see the annotations in our full document for that information. So I want to highlight just a few of the notable sections of the Model Neighborhood Development Floating Zone. I'm going to start with Section 103, which clarifies that the NDFZ is a new zoning district added to the relevant title of the local zoning code and applicable to any development that complies with the LEED and D locational prerequisites. This ensures that the floating zone will be applied only in those neighborhoods in the community that have existing infrastructure, that are compact in their development pattern, that support transit use and connectivity to services, just for example, and avoid environmentally vulnerable areas. It also ensures that the district will not be applied in areas that are incompatible with a more sustainable pattern of land development accomplished under LEED and D, such as areas where larger lots, single-family homes, sensitive environmental lands, or fertile agricultural soils predominate. So in this way, the zone is self-limiting. Because LEED and D projects typically have significantly longer entitlement and construction periods than most projects, such as those obtaining certification under the LEED for new construction rating system, USGBC created a 3-stage system for when an application may be submitted for certification under LEED and D. And Stage 2 certification requires that all land use entitlements be obtained. So because the NDFZ incorporates the prerequisites and the locally accepted credits of the LEED and D rating system, the NDFZ will assist developers in meeting those eligibility requirements for Stage 2 certification through showing that the zone has been mapped to the project site. So it really creates that further incentive there for developers to request to apply the zone. Doesn't seem that the slide is advancing. Hold on one second. Oh, there we go. Section 104. Section 104 just creates a pre-application process, and within that, any developer interested in submitting an application under the floating zone would meet with the local planner and other appropriate economic development and code enforcement staff in a mandatory work session. And this creates all sorts of opportunities to communicate about the desired results. The parties will take this time to settle on the credits the project is going to earn, and it helps avoid a lot of later conflict and confusion with the project. Section 105, that's sort of the key of all of this. This is the district standards. Section 105 asks the applicant to submit with their petition for rezoning the current version of the LEED and D rating system under which the project will seek certification, which is easily available for download on the USGBC's website. They also have to submit proof of project registration with GBCI. And through Section 105, the NDFZ places the burden on the applicant who is requesting that the new zone be affixed to his or her land to select parcels appropriate for green development and to demonstrate that the property can satisfy the LEED and D smart location and linkage prerequisites. This approach also rightfully puts in the hands of the developer, who again understands construction costs, design, and markets, the responsibility of selecting a location where such development is economically feasible, as opposed to a more traditional rezoning approach under which the municipality itself has to identify those appropriate areas. The floating zone approach also in this way adapts easily to changing market conditions. And similarly, it automatically adjusts to future changes in LEED and D without facing the legal issues that are typically presented by automatic updates of third-party standards, because it's based on the submissions of applicants who will incorporate these changes into their petitions for rezoning. Under Section 107, the local legislative body makes a determination as to whether the project meets the locational prerequisites. This section also allows the municipality to customize its district standards to the specific context and in light of a particular development project. So specifically, the NDFZ provides opportunity with each application for the community to exclude certain LEED and D prerequisites and credits from the applicable district standards based upon contextual appropriateness. This gives the local legislative body the opportunity to determine what is needed to achieve the desired level of sustainability in a given neighborhood and to eliminate credits that in the aggregate could be overly burdensome or cost prohibitive. For example, if they would result in a project being forced to achieve the equivalent of LEED Platinum level certification when the applicant really intended on achieving the lower level of certification. And finally, our final section, Section 108. This section establishes a separate and expedited process for the Planning Board to follow for the review of the details of an applicant's full project proposal. I do want to note that some jurisdictions don't provide authority within the zoning process to amend site plan and subdivision standards. So as any good consultant needs to tell you, you'll surely want to talk to your municipal council to determine permissibility of parts of Section 108 under your state law. Some jurisdictions may just need to take an action separate from this floating zone to achieve the effect of this section. And with that, I want to thank you all and turn it back over to Casey and Ben for our Q&A period.
Thanks very much, Jenny. We have a number of questions from our participants, some great ones. And actually, I'd like to start it out by asking a question, and I think it was Meg who talked about the affordability limits and the targeting of, I think it was between 60 and 100% of AMI. My question is, if a development were proposed that targeted more deeply, say to 50% AMI, would it not get points under the rating system for LEED ND?
You know, Casey might want to chime in on this one too.
Yes, I can jump in.
Yeah, why don't you jump in, because that's technical to the criteria.
Sure. Yeah, the rating system does certainly, in the neighborhood pattern and design credit category, specifically credit 4, provides points for those developments that incorporate affordability, and the points do vary based on the amount of units set aside and how deep that affordability target is. So it's certainly there.
Okay, we have we have a comment from one participant. At the beginning of the webcast, I announced the wrong event code, and the correct event code, if you're searching and need to file for AICP CM credits, is 23941, and a gold star to Amy Danner for her awareness of that. Some questions. Kristen Inchek asks, what are some innovative or particularly effective ways that financial incentives have been used to encourage LEED ND projects or sustainable development?
So can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. What are some innovative or particularly effective ways that financial incentives have been used to encourage LEED ND projects or sustainable development?
You know, I think most of the financial incentives we've seen we've seen a lot of direct financial assistance. Let's see. Yeah, I think for the most part, our examples are the financial incentives are really offering direct financial incentives, so assistance. So we've seen municipalities, you know, pay for certain infrastructure, maybe pay for public open space, you know, something along those lines to help a LEED ND project meet the criteria in the rating system, and in the technical guidance manual does list best management practices, so you can go there to see you know, what we highlight there. I don't know them off the top of my head, but you can find those specific examples in the manual.
Okay, thank you. Douglas Melnick asks, how does LEED ND integrate with eco-districts?
I can go ahead and take this one. They, I think, are very much complementary in many ways. You know, I think there are many municipalities pursuing ND certification that are also involved with eco-districts. Certainly, they don't have any direct linkages to each other, no credit compliance paths. But generally speaking, eco-districts is great and very applicable for existing neighborhoods and existing infrastructure in that context in some ways that LEED ND maybe doesn't apply to some of those existing contexts. So there are sort of examples where one may be more applicable than the other, but we would certainly like to think that they're complementary.
This is John. I just want to add a thought to that, which is the Portland Sustainability Institute lends guidance around creating eco-districts. One of the first activities is to identify early projects, and I think a LEED ND screen on an eco-district would be an excellent way of identifying some early eco-district projects. So I think the complementary aspect of these two things has a little bit more to do with, say, program and tool, if you will, eco-districts perhaps being a program, LEED ND being employed as a tool to identify actions, to measure performance, to recognize leadership.
A question from James Garofalo, and I have to preface this by asking the panel, who among you, if any, has read the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Kuntz yet? It's came out on Wednesday, or I think it was Wednesday of this week, which is a limitation on conditions of approval.
I've read a brief overview. This is Casey. I haven't had a chance to read the ruling itself, but certainly it's a bit concerning. Yeah,
well, the question then is how, if it does, how will Kuntz affect the codification of development requirements? This may just be too fresh to be able to answer adequately.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have any great insight. I think you know, especially if the if Meg and Jennie from the Pace Law School have a chance to review it, it could be a very interesting follow-up question. You know, I think it has a great potential to impact the use of proffers and various development agreements, and in the the extent that those interface with LEED ND and sort of the developers, or sorry, the municipalities are requiring those in order to implement some of the green infrastructure techniques in their municipalities. I think that it certainly has the potential to be limiting going forward.
Right, and I would encourage all attendees to look up John Echeveria's opinion op-ed piece in the New York Times from yesterday or the day before on Kuntz. I think that's valuable reading for all planners. Let's see, we have another question here from Lonnie Dixon. Are these standards recommended for communities of, say, 100,000 populations and above? I work with municipalities of 300 to 15,000, smaller communities. I have difficulty getting communities to adopt their first zoning ordinance focused on keep it simple principles. I would have a difficult time getting LEED zoning principles included in most ordinances. What do you think?
Yeah, we get that. We get that comment a lot, and I think this manual really operates kind of almost like an a la carte menu, and I think it's worthwhile because LEED ND is recognized as a national standard for how to build sustainably. It's worthwhile for any community to just flip through and look at the different techniques and decide what might be appropriate for them. And this is kind of it does function as a national kind of like baseline standard. They could, if it's appropriate in their region, they could bump it up a notch and make it more stringent, or they could water it down a little bit if that's more appropriate for their community. And I can't stress enough the importance of having an upfront discussion with the community and involving everyone and talking about it to find out what the concerns are, and to make sure everyone knows what you're talking about and everyone's on the same page. The density issues and some of the more urban features of the manual, the criteria that that when you really dig down deep into it, you can create something that's very walkable and very lovely without creating New York City. It can become appropriate for a suburban setting, but that's something that we're exploring further. We want to explore further at the center how to make this kind of sustainable development appropriate for more than just urban areas, but we also want to look at rural and suburban areas. So we're exploring that, but I think there are ways that all communities can use this manual if they just take a look at it and look at the table contents, run down it, think about how it might be appropriate for you, involve everyone in the conversation.
Yeah, well, speaking here in New Hampshire, I'm eagerly awaiting the LEED R for rural standards. From Andrea Malcolm, we have this question. Any recommendations for how to ensure ongoing oversight of LEED ND projects after they are certified? For example, credit given for various features. Credit is given for various features, but if they're not maintained, used properly, etc., by future owners or residents, the project may not actually achieve energy savings and or other green benefits.
Right. I don't know if Casey might have something to say about this, but the covenants and restrictions part. I know a lot of features in a lot of criteria in the rating system require something put in place to preserve an amenity in perpetuity. So I think that using that kind of a tool maybe during the negotiation process with the developer could be something that you could do. But yeah, that is an important something to think about. Casey, do you want to add?
I think that's exactly it. Much of the rating system is intended to require those covenants and restrictions in such a way that going forward we have good faith that it will be maintained as intended. We don't have the authority to come back and remove plaques or delist a project. And I mean, certainly it would be nice, as we're considering ways to engage with existing neighborhoods, to be able to incorporate some sort of performance standard. That doesn't sort of exist at the moment, but as each of the credits are written, the intention is such that the structure is put in place to ensure that maintenance does go forward. So that's the intention and the hope.
So the issue is really one of municipal enforcement, not by USGBC.
Correct.
Okay. Well, we are now at 2:30, and we are out of time, though there are more questions, so we'll have to save those for another day. I want to thank our panelists, Casey Studhalter, Meg Byerly, John Dalzell, and Jennie Nolon Blanchard for this excellent presentation. For those of you who are still in attendance, I just want to go through a few reminders. First, to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to www.planning.org/CM. Select today's date, and then select the name of the webcast, which is Utilizing LEED for Neighborhood Development to Strengthen Your Municipal Sustainability Efforts. Also, we are recording today's session, so you'll be able to find the recording of this webcast on our YouTube channel. Just look up Planning Webcast Series. This concludes today's session, and I want to thank everyone again for attending.